Hi friends, my name is Brittany from Brittany Loves Reading, and we are off to Paris. Bree has told us that we are headed to Paris, and for this round, I actually had a kind of idea of what I would be reading. Because I have a book club with Bree, and Bree obviously picked a book for the book club and the time that we are reading it so that it would work for the Amazing Readathon. So I knew that on the 10th and the 11th of the month, I would be reading this book. So I am going to start it tonight on sprints. The Accidental Book Club is a book club that we started accidentally. We sprint 2 nights in a row on our regular sprint nights. So we decided to read a book one time on Monday and Tuesday night and read half on Bree's channel and half on mine, and it's just stuck. So now we do it every month. So this month we're going to start on sprints tonight, The Unkindness of Ghosts by River Solomon. This is going to be my Paris book. I'm going to read half of it tonight on Bree's channel, half of it tomorrow night on mine, and that will get me to Paris. Since I'm only going to be reading this on sprints, I am going to be working on a couple other books during the day, and I will submit those as sightseeing books when I am done this book on Tuesday night. That'll give me something to do until I can get to this later today on sprints. And since I let Bree have full control of what the book pick was for this month, because Bree knew a lot more information than I did going into the Amazing Readathon, I don't really know much about this, so I am going to update you once I've gotten it started and know a little bit more about what's happening. But I did want to start the vlog and say welcome to Almost Paris, and let's get started. So it is the next day, and I've actually read quite a bit of The Unkindness of Ghosts. I read about the first part and a bit last night on sprints. And this book, at first, I was having a hard time wrapping my mind around what was going on. It's very much a trust the process book. I wasn't not enjoying the time. I was having a good time trusting the process. What I was reading was enjoyable, but could I really picture everything and fully understand this world in this book? Not completely. As I read part 2 today, it all started to kind of come together. Do I fully understand all the science going on? No, I don't. Is that necessary? No, it's not. I'm not missing anything, not fully understanding all the science. But during part 2, it really did start to come together of what this world system is on this spaceship. This is a massive, massive spaceship. We were discussing the size of this on sprints last night, and we decided it was like Death Star type thing. Basically like a planet that flies. There are, from what I can tell, 26 decks, each one a letter of the alphabet. The higher up you are, the more prestigious in society you are. The further down you are, the more they look down on you. You're living in slum-like conditions. There does seem to be a racial component inside this classism as well, where again, the upper people seem to be white, the lower people seem to be people of color. And so there's a lot of racism happening in the society. There's a lot of classism happening in the society. And the more I got through this book, the more I started to understand kind of how the society works on this spaceship. In this book, we follow our main character, Aster, who lives on one of the lower decks. However, Aster does seem to have some kind of leniency because she is the assistant of the surgeon on the ship. She is his assistant. He has met her through a process of years and years ago, being a part of an abortion that is happening, and Aster being one of the friends that was there. The surgeon meets her and finds out that she actually has a lot of intelligence and decides to take her as an assistant. This, being the assistant, lets her get to go on the upper levels. Other people are not necessarily allowed on those upper levels, but she goes as an assistant. And she really is dialed into what's going on in the political system due to being an assistant of the surgeon. And there's a lot going on politically currently in this book. And it seems like the politics may even somewhat coincide with her mother, who died many, many years ago, because what happened to her mother and how her mother died may be slightly connected or very similar to how the current leader of this civilization is currently sick and potentially dying. The way some people are treated in this book, it's absolutely heart-wrenching. And the commentary in this book is done so well, and it's just so engrossing. I'm so intrigued to see how this kind of continues forth and where this story goes. It really is a character-focused book. Yes, there is a plot with this political system, but we really are following our characters as they live in the existence and the class that they are now in, and trying to figure out a way to survive that and also maybe rise above it. It's really hard. A lot of the topics in this book are very hard to read. There's a lot of very serious things going on in this book. There are definitely a lot of triggers in this book. There's a lot happening. There's also a lot of medical things happening in this book because as it is following a surgeon and his apprentice, we see a lot of surgeries and things happening on the ship as well. I'm barely even covering the intricacies of this book. It is so intricate. And because it's so obscure in the way that it's told and it is such a trust the process, I'm only getting bits and bits and bits and bits, and I'm getting to piece them together as we go along. So tonight on Sprints, I am going to pick this up and continue and read part 3 on Sprints. I don't think there's a part 4, so I will finish this up tonight. I'm really intrigued to see how this kind of all comes together because there's so many facets to this book, and I don't really know where we're going to end up specifically, but I want to know what the author's vision for this book was and to see how it all comes together in the end. On Tuesday night, I finished The Unkindness of Ghosts. It's now Thursday. I've had a minute since I've been picking up a camera. Wednesday is always a busy day, and I tend not to. But I did finish this right before bed on Tuesday night. I ended up giving it 4 stars. There's a lot of things I loved about this book, and there's really not much I can talk about with the plotting of this book. I can talk about the themes, but not so much the plotting, because this is a trust the process book. A lot of the first part of this book, I was confused. I told you this in the last bit. And as you go through the book, the author gives you the pieces that you need to figure out what's going on. So I think on reread, I would enjoy this book even more, just because now I have a lot more of the pieces. The writing acumen required to write a book that way is very high, which makes me really want to dive in more to this author's backlist because I think I'm going to enjoy the author's actual writing and technique so much because I did in this book. The themes of this book and what it was trying to say, and it really is very character focused, so you really learn to follow our characters and you feel every emotion for them. You feel anger, you feel sadness, you want to know what's going to happen to them, you hope they have a good outcome. You want them to kind of overthrow this society that is holding them down, and you want them to find a way out, but it's so big and so daunting that I didn't even know how they would. I felt every range of emotion in this book. I felt sad. There were moments my heart just broke when certain things happen to certain characters. There are so many triggers in this book. Please keep that in mind. It's very heavy. But it was really well done. The only reason it didn't get 5 stars is because I could not overlook the fact that I was confused for a third of this book. Even though it was an interesting way to tell a story, I do wish we would have had a little bit more world building at the beginning for me to really picture this society and also the ship that they're on and everything that we're talking about with the medical stuff that's happening in this book a little bit better. There were so many times where I was just reading words that really had no meaning to me, and that was the only reason this did not get 5 stars. I think on reread, it very well could, just because I now have a lot more through the book that would make me understand the beginning a lot better. But I'm definitely going to be reading more by this author soon. However, that is the end of this book. And on Wednesday, even though I didn't pick up the camera, we did get a city drop. So I do know what I'm reading and have started on that. So let's talk about that next. On Wednesday, Bree did drop a new city, and that was Cape Town, South Africa. So we are off to Cape Town. This prompt was actually pretty easy. I had a lot of options for this. I did go with my mandatory read that I had. I did have a few non-mandatory reads on Timmy's, but I did have a book club read that I really do need to get to before the end of the month. And I'm concerned if I don't do it now, I won't get to it. And then I will be behind on getting that video done. So that is my Patreon book club book, Threadneedle by Carly Thomas. As I said, I have to do that this month. This needs to happen. I need to get out an exclusive video for my patrons. And with that being said, I am exclusively vlogging a spoiler vlog for them. So I won't be vlogging it here in totality. I will come in when I'm finished and tell you like my star ratings and kind of the things I liked, things I didn't like, but I won't be updating throughout the book just because I'm doing that vlog instead. But this is how I will be getting to Cape Town. I'll be reading this leading up to Face Off and maybe a little bit over Face Off just because she is chunky. I keep reading very chunky books. But I will be reading this and also doing Face Off this weekend. So I'll be reading a lot of small books alongside of it. And Face Off will be a separate vlog. So you won't see it here. You will see that in the vlog. It will probably already be out by the time you see this vlog. Actually, it definitely will be. So you will already have seen Face Off by the time you see this. But I will chat with you once I finish this and potentially when a new city starts. It just depends on how early I finish this before then. So I have finally reached Cape Town, and I ended up giving Threadneedle 4 stars. This book really grew on me as I read it. At first, I was like, oh, this is very YA, because it does take place in a high school and following witches in a high school, and it was very YA, and I wasn't sure about it. The more we went through it and the more that we saw what was happening and all the witchy mysteries that were happening, I was sold on this book. And I need to pick up the novella and the second book very soon because the cliffhanger on this was massive. So I did give it 4 stars. I've made it to Cape Town, and since that has happened, we have actually had another city drop. So let's talk about how I am getting to Madagascar. So we now know that we are heading to Madagascar, and it is public knowledge that Team Sci-Fi was U-turned. So that means I need to do 2 books to get there, which is a lot. I'm a bit concerned, but you know what? We're just gonna keep reading. We're gonna just keep moving forward. Luckily, this prompt works for 2 books that I am already currently reading. One of them I started before the month actually started, but I was not 49% through yet, so I can count the pages that I did read in June. The other one I started on June 2nd for a book club that I host, and I have been waiting to get back to it. I've been waiting for it to work for a prompt. So thankfully, I am already a ways through each of these books just prior to this leg announcement. So the first one I'm going to be reading is The Shadow Rising by Robert Jordan. I am hosting a Wheel of Time read-along in the B&K Book Club Discord, so I need to read this. I was actually supposed to finish it last month, did not get it done. So I need to finish it this month because we are moving on to book 5 at the end of this month. I need to finish this book. I had read up until the point of June 1st. I had read up to page 425. I marked it with a Post-it because I did work on some of this today before I had a chance to come update the vlog. I was on Cassidy Sprints and I was reading The Shadow Rising. So I am now on page 607 of this book. I have a little under 400 pages left, about 370, 380 pages. So this is going to be my first book. This is going to be my travel book to get me to Madagascar. Then I am going to switch over to The Familiar. Let me grab that and kind of give you an update on where I am in that. So I am going to then switch over to The Familiar. I'll update you more on this once I've finished that one, but this is going to be my U-turn book. And I am currently on page 209, which is over 50% of this book, but I did not start it until June 2nd. So this still works for the readathon because I did read all the pages in June. I have been waiting for it to work, and now it does. So I am going to work on The Shadow Rising first, then jump back into that. I'm not going to update you until the end of The Shadow Rising because it is the 4th book in Wheel of Time, and everyone knows about Wheel of Time, and there's just really no reason for me to do multiple updates on a book that I can't talk the specifics about because it is the 4th book and would spoil everything, and also a really popular series that like everybody who is interested knows the general outline of what Wheel of Time is. So I will just come back in this vlog and tell you like what I gave the book at the end, and then I will kind of talk more in depthly about what's going on in The Familiar when I'm about ready to pick it back up again. I hope that makes sense. I hope you're following. Let's get to Madagascar. I've got a lot of reading to do. I have finally finished The Shadow Rising, and I'm not going to lie, this has taken me a lot longer than I anticipated it taking, mostly because I was not enjoying this book. The last book in this series that I read, I gave 5 stars. I really liked the 3rd book, The Dragon Reborn. This was a big middle book with not a lot happening, and what was happening I was not interested in. I think if you went back at the end of the series and reread this, a lot of things would make more sense. But since this is my first read through, it was very much just meeting a ton of people that I didn't have any context in knowing. I did really like the Perrin chapters because Perrin was back in his hometown in this book, and I did really enjoy seeing Perrin back and kind of seeing his journey and how far he's come. But most of this book was just very kind of boring for me, unfortunately. I'm excited to continue with the series because I have liked other books in the past, but this one is my least favorite and I did only give it 2.5 stars. With that though, I have reached Antananarivo and I need to now get my U-turn done. And as I said last time I chatted with you, I am reading The Familiar, which I have just over here. So I am going to jump into The Familiar tomorrow. It's quite late at night when I'm doing this update, so I will get back to this tomorrow. In this book, we are following a maid named Louisa. Louisa can do magic by like speaking kind of ancient and different language words and somehow singing it and making magic happen. The woman who owns the house that Louisa works in ends up finding out about this magic and starts using Louisa to kind of like move up in the world in society by bringing over like rich and famous people to a dinner party where she shows off her magic. This gets the attention of the secretary of the King of Spain, who I forget his name because it has been a minute since I picked this up. He finds out about this and enters her into basically some sort of magical trials. And those are just starting at the point where I am in the book. I've just seen the first trial when I had to put this down to move on to other things. So I'm excited to dive back in. There's a lot about religion in this book, so it definitely works for the prompt because in this time, because it is historical, the church does not look highly on magic. And actually Louisa, to perform in the trials, has to like be seen by a priest to confirm that her magic is from God. It's really interesting, but historical fantasy is not typically something that I read a lot of. Do I love this as much as 9000 Hellbent? No, but I'm excited to continue, and I should be able to finish this tomorrow because it is reading very, very quickly. I finished The Familiar, and for the first time in a very long time, I am caught up on The Amazing Race. Last night, Bree dropped a prompt, so I'm going to start that vlog when I end this one. I've already started reading that book, but I will start that vlog next, so you will see all that in a new vlog. But I have done my U-turn and The Familiar. This book is a book that I've read. That's what this book is. It's a little bit higher than that just because I do love the writing style, and there are certain times in this book where just sentences would leap out at me and just captivate me. But that is the writing style and not the story that I was enjoying. The story in itself, I did not love. I kept wanting it to pick up. I kept wanting it to do something more than it did because it really did just focus historically on what was happening in Spain at this time. There is a magical component with Louisa and a couple other characters, but it is more magical realism than straight fantasy. And especially in the second half of this book, we dive deep into the Spanish Inquisition. This is not a history I was very familiar with, and that was okay. Like, I didn't feel lost not being familiar with the history, but it also was not something I was super bought into. I wanted it to be more fantasy, less historical, and I knew that going in that was not a genre that I typically loved. I was hoping that it being Leigh Bardugo style would captivate me past the point of it being historical fantasy, and it did and it didn't. This book just kind of became very middle of the road for me. I kept wanting something more to happen and it just really didn't, or at least not in the way that I found interesting. So it breaks my heart to say this since both Ninth House and Leigh Bardugo were on my best books of the year last year, but I'm giving this a 3.5 star. I'm honestly having horrible luck with anticipated releases from favorite authors this year. My most anticipated romance release of the year got 3.5 stars. My most anticipated fantasy release of the year, 3.5 stars. And all my favorite books of the year, which I just talked about in my mid-year freakout tag, are all authors I've never read from before. So my tried and true authors that I was really excited about picking up their new releases just have not been hitting for me, which makes me a little nervous for the ones I'm still excited about. Hopefully some other anticipated releases will work out better than the ones I've read so far this year. But this is the end of the legs 4 through 6 for the Amazing Readathon. As always, let me know what your favorite book so far from those legs was. There must have been a winner for you. For me, it was Threadneedle. I really did enjoy that book and had a fun time with it. It was a little overwritten, but I'm excited to dive into the novella and the sequel. I think we're going to be doing that over the next few months, so I'm excited to dive in more to that story. But let me know from those legs, what has your favorite book been so far? Thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.